our clients' invited speakers. We attempted to enter into a negotiation with Cal about this. I wrote them a detailed letter the day I was retained, and I got a response from the university. And in the university's response on Friday, which many of you who've been following the story would have seen online, the university admits that this policy exists, and it admits that the application of the policy is largely driven by the anticipated reaction of a hostile crowd to conservative speakers at Berkeley. And they point to the example of Milo Yiannopoulos, and they note that they anticipate Ms. Coulter receiving negative feedback from people in the community, and it specifically refers to outside groups and agitators who have told Cal that they're going to come and disrupt the speech. So on the basis of that, rather than look at what their constitutional obligations are to allow equal access of conservative students to the university's facilities, they chose instead to allow what we call a heckler's veto in First Amendment litigation. And that means they're allowing critics to silence the speech of a legitimate voice that's otherwise allowed to speak at that venue. This is not permitted by the First Amendment. Just last week at Auburn University, there was a similar case where a speaker was shut down by the university. A lawsuit was filed, and the court noted in requiring the venue to be allowed to be public to that speaker that you cannot allow a heckler, a protester, to shut down legitimate speech. You would think that this would be something that would be obvious to administrators at the birthplace of free speech in the United States. As is well known, Mario Savio and the free speech movement in the 1960s was just around these exact issues. In fact, Berkeley is well known as a place where ideas used to be welcome, at least on the conservative side, until this recent election. There is some interplay here. It's not mentioned in our lawsuit, but it's something that we're looking at. And the fact that in the Milo situation, the city police of Berkeley appear to have simply stood down and not taken any action with regard to quelling the violent protest. There was one arrest or something very minimal in that situation. It's illegal in California for people to wear masks and protest and commit violent acts, and there was no enforcement of that law at this event or any event that I've seen here in California recently. And here we are now aware, and you can see detailed in our lawsuit, that this policy is partially driven by the mayor's office in Berkeley. There was a meeting on March 1st that's detailed in our complaint that included the mayor's office, that included the university management, that included the university police department, that included the Berkeley City Police. And that's where this secret policy was concocted. It's telling that the policy isn't written. It's telling that the policy has not been publicized, and it's telling that my clients have gone through 2 events, and only at the end of the second event did they find out that they were not going to be allowed to speak because of this unwritten policy. The university has attempted to save face in the face of national criticism of its actions by asking Ms. Coulter to come speak on May 2nd. As we pointed out in our subsequent correspondence in this matter, May 2nd is a week when there aren't any students on campus because they're studying for finals. It's the dead week. They also are requiring Ms. Coulter to speak from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., which is not a time limit placed on the former head of state of Mexico last week or other prominent speakers. They also suggested maybe she should speak in the fall. Our student clients asked them whether the same limitations would apply, given that they'd have 5 months to arrange security and arrange a safe space for her to speak. And the answer was yes. Ms. Coulter will pretty much never be allowed to speak at the same time, place, and manner as liberal speakers on the Berkeley campus. This is unconstitutional. It violates not only the First Amendment rights of our clients, but also the due process rights of our clients, the equal protection rights of our clients under the 14th Amendment. And there's also a claim for retaliation under the First Amendment right of free speech, where our clients exercise their right to unpopular speech by inviting Milo Yiannopoulos to come speak on the campus, and as a result of exercising that free speech on that occasion in February, they've now been retaliated against by the administration by this policy that appears only to have been applied to conservative speakers at Cal. We were forced to file this lawsuit because Cal's response was simply, we can do whatever we want because somebody made a threat. That's manifestly not the law. My colleague, Krista, was at a meeting today with administrators at Cal and the two student groups that invited the speaker to speak. And the main content in that meeting, and Krista can speak more to this if you're interested, was providing safe spaces for the students because of their trauma over this controversy. Trauma over the controversy, not trauma over the violations of their free speech rights. To me, that's way more traumatic. It's more traumatic to them in their careers. It's more traumatic, frankly, to the institution of Cal as the jewel in the crown, really, of our California higher education system. So that's appalling that that is the focus in this day and age as to what the university should be concerned about. It should be concerned about providing its students with a robust education and robust exposure to different viewpoints. Cal has also attempted to put the burden of ensuring safety of people at these events on the students, which is not where it belongs. So, for example, in one of the two events that was canceled for Speaker David Horowitz earlier this month, Cal first required that he speak in a distance from campus, off the main campus, in fact, a car ride or a shuttle ride away from the campus. They also required that he only speak between 1 and 3 p.m. They also required that only students be allowed to attend that event, or they strongly suggested it. They also asked that the students not publicize the event. And they also, by demanding that the event take place during classes, ensured that there would be hardly any students who could attend it and go across town. By the time that the registrations came in for this event, there were only 30 students who were able to attend the event or had registered for the event, as opposed to the hundreds that had been expected had he been able to speak in the center of town. Adding insult to injury, Cal then gave a bill for nearly $6,000 for the security of 30 students to attend this way off-campus event. That's $200 per student for the students to pay for the security. We also see from the complaint that Cal's policy is not to intervene at all if there's violence happening on the campus. Unless somebody is about to be killed, that's their standard for intervening. So if somebody's merely being beaten up, rocks are merely being thrown, people are merely being punched in the head, that's not sufficient for the university police to intervene to assure the safety of students and other invitees and visitors on the Cal campus. So this is, again, unacceptable, both for me as a taxpayer and, frankly, for me as a citizen. There's 3 days left until this event on Thursday. I understand, and I don't represent Ann Coulter. I understand she's still planning to come because the students have arranged for and paid for her to be here. And she's expended travel expenses to be here. The YAF group, our main plaintiff, or our lead plaintiff, has expended travel to be here, travel for her security to be here. And we have a lot of people who are interested in seeing Ann Coulter here at the campus on Thursday. And so we very much hope that that event can go forward. That's entirely within the University of California, Berkeley's hands. Berkeley identified about 8 venues that are detailed in our complaint that could have held the people for this event. And they discussed dates. They even told the students that certain venues were available in the afternoon and evening of Thursday, April 27th. And then abruptly, somebody on high said, oh, that's a high-profile person. Implement the policy. Implement the double secret policy, Dean Wormer. And so then all of a sudden, these venues were taken out from under them. So it's unfortunate because taxpayers are going to end up paying the cost of this litigation if we prevail, which we fully expect to prevail. Attorneys' fees are awarded in cases like this. As a taxpayer, I don't want to see that happen. So Cal can avoid this litigation from going forward, its policies from being challenged, and its students from being robbed from alternative viewpoints if they simply make one of those venues they said was available, make it available on Thursday evening. Provide the security that they're charging for, provide the security that they provide to other famous people who come to speak on the campus. Supreme Court justices, the Dalai Lama, the former president of Mexico, famous people come to Cal all the time to speak, and they're allowed to speak, and their speech is not barred, their speech is not relegated to 1 to 3 p.m., their speech is not relegated to being off campus, and their speech is not restricted to only students, and their speech is not restricted to not being advertised. So these are all unique requirements that are being imposed on conservative speakers at Cal. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions about the lawsuit.
when you present them with these facts, what is their response? If you say none of these rules apply to anyone else except conservative speakers, what is their retort?
They don't really have one. The letter that the dean, I forget the name of the dean, is it? No, the lawyer, Chris Patty, chief campus counsel for Cal, wrote to me on Friday afternoon, was a 2-page letter. The entirety of the analysis of the constitutionalism of their actions was one sentence that said, we believe it's entirely constitutional, period, full stop.
Harmeet, you're saying this only applies to conservative speakers. If there was a threat from whatever groups against any speaker of any stripe, wouldn't this rule apply?
Well, I don't know. That's something to ask Cal. Cal doesn't have the rule written down. As what we can see, they've only applied it to these conservative speakers. But let me be clear. It would be equally illegitimate for Cal to bar the speech of a liberal speaker because a conservative group vowed to protest and disrupt that speech. That's also illegal. So we don't view this as a conservative liberal issue. We view this as a constitutional issue. We view this as a void for vagueness issue. A government policy that is not written, that has infinitely malleable standards, and that can be applied arbitrarily based on viewpoint is unconstitutional. It's void for vagueness, and that is an allegation in our complaint as well.
Congresswoman Jackie Spear said today that the university has no obligation to set themselves up for a violent interaction. Ann Coulter has been invited back. She's chosen not to show up on the date that they can make available. This is Ann Coulter's attempt to stir the pot and get herself some publicity.
Well, that's kind of what you get when people who are amateurs at First Amendment law talk about it, because she doesn't know what she's talking about. Number one, the university is a limited public forum, and so as a matter of law, it is required to give equal access to speakers of different viewpoints. That is absolutely black letter established Hornbook law. Number two, it is also equally established, as the case I cited from Auburn last week, that you cannot allow hecklers to interfere with these speech rights. Everybody has their role to play in this scenario, okay? The students started this. The students are student groups, 2 of them, one nonpartisan, one partisan, and they want to hear interesting speakers. That's what you do when you're a college student. You want to hear some interesting speakers. So they went and found the funding. The role of the funding organization is to say, yes, I'll write you a check. That sounds like a good speaker. I'll help you with the arrangements. And speakers like Ann Coulter, speakers like some of the others I mentioned, Supreme Court justices, people who are famous, they may require travel expenses, honoraria, so average student groups can't afford them. So they played their role. The role of the administration is as follows. They are required to provide a content-neutral platform of equal access to all student groups to access their facilities. They cannot discriminate on the basis of viewpoint or popularity. The University of California Police Department is supposed to play a role, which is keep the students and invitees safe on the campus. That's their job. And then finally, the city of Berkeley, which overlaps in many ways with the campus because of the way the campus is structured, they have a role to play, which is that if bad violence breaks out, like we saw in the Milo Yiannopoulos case, they make some arrests. They force those masked people to take their masks off, and they enforce the law. They didn't do their job in that case. The UCPD isn't doing its job. The administrators aren't doing their job by making sure that equal access is given to all of the students to the facilities of the university. So the only people who've done their jobs here are the students, including one nonpartisan group that just wanted to hear debate, and the organization that provided the funding for that speaker to come. With regard to your point about Ann Coulter, she's a 12-time author, New York Times bestselling author, 1.5 million Twitter followers. I'm fairly confident that she doesn't need a college speaking gig on campus to increase her popularity in the media or her notoriety. She's quite notorious. She has spoken on hundreds of college campuses. And we would not be sitting here in this room talking about it if Cal hadn't capitulated and allowed hecklers to silence the speech on campus. And what these students are now being told is that because of this arbitrary policy, we're going to decide, based on how unpopular your speaker is, where that person gets to speak and when. And if that speaker is popular and no one's going to protest, they can speak right in the middle of campus in prime time. That's just not allowed under the Constitution, and you cannot use the violence, as the Auburn case shows us in a different court, as a veto. Yes?
Ann Coulter tweeted earlier today a picture, a graphic of the weather, and said Thursday looked like a nice day to speak outside on Berkeley's campus. I recognize you don't represent her. If Ann Coulter shows up on Berkeley's campus on Thursday and speaks outside, based on how that plays out, could your clients be held liable in any way? If somebody's injured, if something else happens, could they be held liable from a legal standpoint?
Well, they invited Ann Coulter to come speak in conjunction with an organized thing on the campus, so it's unclear. I don't know where she would speak. The other point is that there are portions of the UC campus that are designated a little differently than a limited public forum. That's what's called, there's Sproul Plaza, I believe, is the place we're talking about outdoors, designated public forum. So that has even more free speech openness to it, and you don't have to necessarily be affiliated with a student group to go there. You can be a preacher or, somebody telling us about the Armageddon and come speak there, and you can speak there. So there are different rules apply to different forums. And then there's sidewalks, and then there's outside the post office. So if you took a map of Berkeley and you sat down with some lawyers, we could give you color coding of which places in Berkeley have which free speech rights. What my two clients invited her to do was speak on the campus in a sanctioned speech in an auditorium where people could sit. And the format of this event was supposed to be a question and answer, kind of a dialogue, fireside chat type of a deal, not Ann Coulter speaking with a megaphone. So I don't think that's the desired outcome. The desired outcome is that UC Berkeley offer her the same platform as the first speaker in the series, or that other famous people are allowed.
Is there a limit on the amount of money and resources that Berkeley should have to spend to protect someone like Ms. Coulter? I mean, these Antifa folks are pretty scary. And so, I mean, is the obligation unlimited? Should they bring in the National Guard, or, if they need to make sure she has the same rights as other folks?
Well, so you raise a good point, and that goes to my point about Berkeley making it the students' problem to assure their own security. It's not their problem. It's the problem of the taxpayers and the people who run the mayor's office and the people who run the police department in Berkeley to make sure that people who are in the premises of Berkeley, California are safe from violent criminals attempting to suppress the rights of others. So what should have happened in that Milo Yiannopoulos situation is the Berkeley police, rather than behaving as shrinking violets, should have taken out their batons, should have taken out their weapons if necessary, should have enforced the anti-mask law in California, should have made arrests on people that every single person in this room saw criminals creating criminal mayhem in Berkeley, and they weren't arrested. That offends me as a citizen. It would offend me if they were conservatives behaving that way, and it offends me that people are allowed to go around with masks and intimidate people. So the burden is not on the students, and frankly, the burden isn't necessarily on UC Berkeley, because it appears that these criminals came from off the campus. These are not gangs of criminal students perpetrating these acts. By the way, Berkeley already shifts security costs onto students. So, for example, in the Milo Yiannopoulos case, the Berkeley College Republicans were required to raise several $1,000s to pay security to UCPD. What does UCPD do in exchange for that security? Apparently nothing. That's what I learned from the emails that I saw. They don't do anything. They won't lift a finger. They won't protect you. They won't arrest anybody. And unless you're literally about to be killed in front of their eyes, they won't do anything. So I'm not really sure. They're not getting good value for their money there with those security fees. And so I think there are a lot of hard questions to be asked to the mayor's office about why he perpetrates or allows mayhem to occur in his premises of his jurisdiction. Why does the UCPD take money from students and not deliver services in exchange for that? Some of the higher security fees that have been demanded by the UCPD have been for conservative groups, but not exclusively. There's an example they're going to tell you if you go ask them about the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama security was $20,000, and that is because the UCPD assessed 25 personnel to that event, and they charged whoever organized it. When you put a prohibitive cost at the end of reducing the audience to 30 you're really asking for that event to be canceled. Nobody in their right minds, particularly conservatives, are going to pay $200 a person to hear somebody off campus. So that event was canceled as a result of that illegitimate burdening of the speech.
How many people do they think are going to
Has
show up?
there been any thought to, there have been some calls by some constitutional law experts of having the president federalize the National Guard and having the National Guard provide security? Has there been any thought to that or any discussion by that?
Well, again, I don't think it's Ann Coulter's or YAF's or Berkeley College Republicans' problem to solve that problem. I think it's first of all, I think the governor has to call out the National Guard, and the president declaring martial law in Berkeley so Ann Coulter can speak is a bit extreme. I'm not suggesting that would be an appropriate outcome, but I think the problem runs deeper than this Ann Coulter event. Just to be very clear, what we have here is a shadowy policy that is, like I said, double secret. We didn't find out about it until on the verge of a lawsuit. And we have a policy that's going to be applied in the future to other speakers in the future unless it's brought out into the open, debated, and accommodated between the needs of the students who want to hear interesting speakers and the university, which has an interest in the safety of all people. I accept that. But to unilaterally declare that certain facilities, all the desirable facilities, are not securable in the sole discretion of the university when they were securable for Vicente Fox last week, that does not pass the smell test of credibility. And so that's the problem we're dealing with, is the double standards. And absolutely, if the mayor of Berkeley cannot maintain control of his city, the governor should call the National Guard, because that's a serious public health issue.
If the university doesn't respond positively to this before Thursday and Ann Coulter comes to the campus, will she be appearing under the auspices of your clients? Are they supporting this? Are they telling her, yes, come? Or is she on her own?
Why isn't she part of the lawsuit?
We have, okay, I'll get to those questions serially. If you can just ask them one at a time, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, if the university doesn't respond and Ann Coulter comes to campus, will she be appearing under the auspices of your clients?
Well, I think I answered that question, which is they've invited her to speak in a authorized manner on the campus. And so if the university doesn't allow her to speak in the way that they allow other people to speak, I mean, they'll have to make that decision on that day. There are still 3 days left. The university has venues available. We're aware of that because the university has told the students there are venues available. They need to change their unwritten policy to allow those venues to be used for her event. They need to staff security appropriately. They need to ask the mayor of the town their university is based in to do his job and make sure people are safe. Now, I mean, the mayor is openly sympathetic to the Antifa side of the table, quite frankly. He's been photographed in groups with people who support that side. He has made and tweeted very negative remarks on the day of the Milo Yiannopoulos event. He tweeted something nasty about that event and that speaker. And so, from a political point of view, there appear to be some choices being made about public resources that are politically motivated. And so that's a separate issue. I know that there are other lawyers who are looking at that issue, and that's an equal protection issue. Those of you who know a little bit about our firm, we're also suing the city of San Jose for doing exactly that, for failing to protect the rights of Trump supporters in a riot that occurred in June last year. And that also appears to have some political aspect to it. So where police don't apply the law to equally protect the citizens, that's also a violation of the same statutes that we've sued under here. I don't have time over 3 or 4 days to start suing everybody. We were retained on Thursday, and today's Monday, and we filed a 30-page complaint.
But to finish the question off, then, if Ann Coulter appears, will she be on her own, or will your students?
I think we're going to. It's Monday. I'm not going to repeat myself. It's Monday. On Thursday, you can ask me that question, and we can see what happens.
Why isn't the mayor part of your lawsuit?
Because I had 3 days, and I'm an ethical lawyer, and I don't go filing lawsuits when I haven't had the time to gather all the data. I am aware of multiple lawyers looking at the failure of the Berkeley mayor and police department to keep citizens safe in the jurisdiction. So I expect you're going to see that happen in court. When you sue a city, so that you are required under California law to file a notice of claim with the city, with the municipality. And that has to be filed within 180 days of the event taking place. And so it would really be impossible for me finding out about this case on Thursday to even do that by Monday. It's not physically possible. But, this is the first draft of the complaint. If it turns out that facts support it, there may be other plaintiffs. But my clients are the Berkeley College Republicans and Young America's Foundation. So they're not here to right all the world's wrongs. There are other people who can do that. They're here to make sure that students on the Berkeley College campus are exposed to alternative viewpoints.
Does Ann Coulter have some role in the lawsuit, because she's been tweeting about it, calling it our lawsuit?
Calling it our lawsuit, yeah.
Well, obviously she's mentioned in the lawsuit. You can see numerous paragraphs of the complaint refer to her event. And so that's the role she's had in it. She's not a client of mine. She's a party. If I would say she would be a witness in this case. If there is, for example, depositions taken, one can anticipate that part of the damages in this case are her expenses in coming to this event, so she would be able to talk to those.
Can you specify what the damages are that you're seeking?
Sure. There's a contract for her to speak. The organization, Young America's Foundation, that arranged for her to speak is responsible for the cost of her honorarium, for the travel and compensation costs of all of her security detail that travel with her to maintain her personal security. And, there's a couple of other administrative costs related to that. That's a minor part of our lawsuit. The damages portion of our lawsuit is minimal, and under the Section 1983, you're only allowed to get damages against certain individuals who are sued in their individual capacity. The main relief that we're seeking in this lawsuit is an injunction preventing Berkeley from applying this illegal policy to my clients or any other student group. The injunction would apply to any student group. If they have a policy, it needs to be equally applied. It cannot be unconstitutionally vague, and it cannot be subject to application according to the whim of administrators based on political viewpoint, or frankly based on the veto of objectors. Whether the administrators support the students or not is not the issue. The issue is that the university is allowing off-campus critics to hijack its role as the appropriate gatekeeper to who gets to use these rooms. The university does not get to do that. And then finally, of course, unfortunately, the taxpayers of California will pay the attorney's fees of this case, because that's a statutory requirement as well. So if the case is not resolved, that's how they end up, and that can become quite costly. Yes?
So this would affect future appearances. She wants to come back to Berkeley. Do the Young Republicans intend to sponsor his appearance even after his controversial statements with regard to pedophilia?
I don't know, and I am not aware of them having any role. So to be clear, I think you may have asked this question, or maybe it was you, just because somebody wants to come speak on the Berkeley College campus, they don't get to do that. That's okay. The main purpose of the campus is an institution of higher learning, but they have a system. They have a system of registered student organization. We have an email attached, I think, as Exhibit A to our complaint, where the dean, after telling our students they couldn't have the speaker they want, says, you're an independent student organization. You can invite whoever you want because of that. So he says that with one side of his mouth, but then he wants them to go off campus and do it in the middle of the night, maybe standing on one leg. I mean, speaking of Pig Latin, increasing additional requirements are being placed on this speech that are unconstitutional. But if Milo wants to come and with his entourage and do his thing in Sproul Plaza, under the law, that's a designated public forum and he can do that. And I don't know that the Young Republicans have anything to do with that.
Could you get this injunction before Thursday? To be clear, is this for future things?
Well, what we filed this morning is a lawsuit that seeks permanent injunctive relief and preliminary injunctive relief. And under the court rules, any of those are going to take a long time to get. So one could also file other types of motions for more expedited relief. But I wanted to give a chance to the Berkeley lawyers to take a look at what we filed. Maybe they weren't aware of some of the bad facts in this case. I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. I will say that the Berkeley Chief Counsel letter that I got on Friday said a number of things that were false. They are falsely claiming, for example, that they just found out about this event from the news. That is a lie. That is not true. And we detailed the timeline of all of the interactions of the Berkeley College Republicans and Young America's Foundation with the university for the weeks preceding this event. And there are other false things in the letter as well. So I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that maybe that gentleman who wrote the letter was misinformed. That's quite possible. I know that I sometimes, as a lawyer, am misinformed by my clients, and I'm happy to be educated that I wasn't saying something correct. So now they can read our 27 or 30-page complaint, and they can see what the facts are. The facts are buttressed by attachments that are emails from university deans, university administrators, saying fluffy and warm things about the ability to get a room until, boom, you can't have a room because this policy applies. You know, now their main offering to the students is grief counseling over the controversy. I mean, that's what we come to. The snowflakes are melting in the dean's office, and, you know, that's how they're dealing with it. It's really silly.
How long does UC Berkeley have to respond to this complaint, if they have to at all? And if between now and Thursday they come up with a venue that is securable, or is there a way, would you remove this?
Absolutely. Well, let me put it this way. The lawsuit is not about Ann Coulter's event. The lawsuit is about the policy that is being used to prohibit, bar, limit the speech of conservative students on the campus. If they agree to lift that policy, I would probably withdraw my lawsuit at that point once we're able to resolve any collateral issues. That's up to my clients, but that's generally what happens when the relief requested is granted by one of the parties. You don't have anything to fight over anymore other than attorney's fees sometimes. But again, that's subject to discussion. Now, how long do they have? We haven't even served them yet. So, you know, we would have to serve them. We've written them a letter asking if their lawyer will accept service, and if their lawyer accepts service, then we're off to the races. But they don't have to respond to what we filed so far until weeks from now. So,
I mean, what would you consider acceptable? What time and what exact time and what place?
Equal. So before somebody on high told the very nice administrator, I think who was in the meeting that Krista was at, that you can't give them what everybody else gets, she was offering the normal rooms. I think Sproul Hall, Hertz Hall, Pauley Ballroom. You know, these are some central places on campus. Our clients in the Horowitz situation requested a nice large room in one of the science buildings. That was denied to them. And so the university won't say what they consider a securable location. We were told that there are several rooms available at the law school this week. There are no classes going on at the law school, I'm told. But they have not been made available to this event because the university defines them as not securable, whatever that means. I mean, what does that mean? And you look at the campus, all of us have been to this campus. It's not rocket science to, you know, put a couple of cops there if they're willing to do their jobs. If they're not willing to do their jobs, then sure, if you're going to have an armed mob and both the Berkeley City Police and the University of California Police don't do their jobs, we are going to have a problem because unfortunately we live in a day and age when people are not as respectful of the rights of others and the views of others as they should be. And that goes both ways, perhaps.
Yeah, are your clients concerned that maybe they get a venue, maybe it's at 8 p.m. and, you know, Sproul Hall, and the police show up with their usual sort of stand-down method of dealing with, you know, with these groups, and then somebody gets hurt? I mean, is your client concerned that they sort of get what they want, but they're sort of sitting ducks there with the Berkeley sort of policy on how to deal with it?
Yes, I think that is a concern. So like I said, this is a multi-factored situation. Everybody has their role to play. All these young students can do is try to bring the speakers on campus. It's the role of the grown-ups, if you will, to arrange for a room, to arrange for financing, to arrange for security, and to arrange for equal access. All of those things are not something in the control of my clients. They're in the control of other people. So Berkeley has to do its job. And as I mentioned, numerous instances, if you can host a Supreme Court Justice of the United States, if you can host former presidential candidates, if you can host Bill Maher as your graduation speaker, if you can host the Dalai Lama, a head of state who is an enemy of the state of China, etc., surely you can host a controversial talking head pundit. So it doesn't seem that difficult to me. And I mean, I went to college. You know, we invited Bill Buckley to come speak on my campus at Dartmouth. I was the head of the college organization. It wasn't popular. The university tried to do all these shenanigans, and finally a professor stood up and said, I'll sponsor the room. I will rent a room for you, and I'll sign for it. And then we had one of the most highly attended events we'd had in Dartmouth history. So It takes a little bit of courage, and right now that seems to be lacking in the UC administration. I don't see them standing up at all, and maybe that's the mayor's fault. I think they should have a conversation what's going on there, that the mayor allows this to happen. It's really quite outrageous.
A member of the Berkeley College Republicans told me that the university did find out about the event through local news. How do you respond to that, given that
you can read my complaint? That's refuted in great detail there.
I mean, do you want to comment at all about the way you were addressed in Berkeley's response? There's a lot of Twitter banter about that. You mentioned earlier that you understand sometimes people make mistakes. Were you offended? Do you think it speaks to anything larger than being an oversight? Do you want to talk about that at all?
I've been practicing law for 25 years. I am born in another country, and my name is often mistaken for a male. So that per se does not offend me. That's an innocent mistake. Where I have threatened to sue the University of California over a major civil rights issue that's going to expose the university's national media, it belies belief that the lawyer on the other side of that letter doesn't look you up. It boggles my mind, and I don't buy it. So that's my response. And I did respond in my response letter. What's humorous here is, like, I don't believe in political correctness. I do believe in courtesy. And so if I don't recognize somebody's gender from their name, I look them up. If I'm writing a lawyer to a letter, I look them up. This is very basic courtesy and etiquette. So neither he looked me up nor did his colleague, or they did it deliberately to insult me. That has happened. I don't know that. But what I do know is that these deans, and you'll see some of the, I think this shows in some of the signature blocks and some of the exhibits, they signed their own correspondence. My preferred gender pronoun is he, her, him. These are people named Joe. I mean, we know what their gender is, generally speaking. I know it's maybe politically incorrect to assume, but that's the level of sensitivity on that side of the table, but it doesn't apply to people who they're addressing. So that is the kind of rank hypocrisy that we're looking at here. But I'm not going to let it color the outcome of this case. So if they want to call me whatever they want, and they are going to provide a room for my clients to have their speech on Thursday, I will listen. Any other questions?
Just one last one. Is there something special about this being in Berkeley?
Something special about it? I mean,
the home of the free speech movement. Now you're
well,
suing.
yeah.
Do you think you'd be suing Berkeley over a First Amendment case?
Well, I never thought I'd be on the same side of an issue as Willie Brown, Bernie Sanders, Bill Maher, Keith Ellison, and every other person who's a lawyer. Now, there's some amateur lawyers like Howard Dean, who looks up a case on the internet and then thinks he's a Supreme Court scholar, and some of our members of Congress who play lawyers on TV apparently. But no, I don't know any serious lawyers who practice constitutional law who think that this is appropriate. And I have had dozens and dozens of emails and calls from lawyers who don't know me around the country. They all start with, I don't support what Ann Coulter says, but, or I hate what Donald Trump stands for, but you're absolutely right on this, and this cannot stand. And so, and nor should it stand if it were happening on a conservative college campus and it were liberal students whose views were being marginalized. And my passion about this dates back to my time at Dartmouth. When I was a Dartmouth student, my colleagues on the Dartmouth Review were expelled from Dartmouth for their speech. Expelled. Because they dared to offend a music professor. Okay, so who represented us in the hinterlands of New Hampshire? The American Civil Liberties Union came in to represent my colleagues on the Dartmouth Review. We sued Dartmouth under the same types of statutes that we're talking about here today, 30 years later, and we won. And Dartmouth was, because it takes federal funds, was required to adhere to federal law and was required to treat the students equally. And so that's what happened. And today, unfortunately, I don't see the ACLU here in this room, which is unfortunate, but there are plenty of lawyers around the country who find this offensive, and this case is beyond what's happening at Cal. As we saw from the Auburn incident, bullies in a mob around the country are barring people from exercising their speech, not just on college campuses, but in public forums, in restaurants, in places that are open to the public. Bullies are crowding out the speech of others, and that's illegitimate in this country. And so the police have to do their job to ensure the security of all of us, so we pay taxes for that, and we're entitled to that. And so I hope that this lawsuit sparks a broader conversation about what are the obligations of universities. And their obligation, first and foremost, is to educate the students. When they are shutting out half of the voices because they're controversial, they're not doing that basic job. I mean, keeping students safe is peripheral to that educational core program. When they're telling students who are concerned, what's going to happen on Thursday if Ann Coulter comes? Would you like some counseling? Can't we put off your exams? These are the things that were offered to these students. Not, how about if we fix the First Amendment violation? How about if we treat you equally? Those would be good lessons to learn for the students, but that's not what's being taught at UC Berkeley. Okay, I am, you know how to reach me through Matt if you have any follow-up, and thank you for your attention and interest in this story.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.